Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Canterbury, to this special live stream visit around the city of Canterbury, where we've chosen Palace Street as our journey today, about the history of Palace Street. And I'm live streaming directly from Canterbury. It's just coming up to 2 o'clock and we start at 2, so just a little panorama around where I stand. I'm at the junction of Guildhall Street, Sun Street, Orange Street and Palace Street, and behind me you can just see Creams, and over the other side over there Chambers. So I sort of mentioned Chambers there, and we'll cover Chambers later on. And behind my spiky hat you can see the top towers of the Cathedral of Canterbury, so I'll just give you some locations there. And 4 people watching already, and hopefully a few more be watching the stream later on. Hi Sylvania again, yeah, well, very good follow you are. And I'll try and mention you as you go around. Now, if you want to ask questions, feel free. I'll answer them at the end. And what time we got? It's just coming up to 2 o'clock. So if you have your glass of bread or white wine in your hand, or a glass of rosé, and you're sitting in the sunshine in your garden, if you have one. If not, you're sitting in your armchair with a nice good cup of coffee or a cup of tea with you. And we can take about an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes on our little tour. There's lots to see. Hi, Lucy. And hopefully we'll be able to get around in one piece. Now, I'm using a stabiliser to try and make myself look relatively stable, and we'll see how that goes. The only thing I can't do on this machine is, for some reason, zoom, although I'm working out a way to be able to do that on the next live stream. I'm hoping to cover all the streets of Canterbury at some point, although, of course, hopefully, soon enough we'll be back and be able to meet in reality. So without further ado, we're going to start our tour. So I'm going to turn the camera around using these magical buttons, and I'm going to sort of move around now before I get caught out. So it's like more at the back of Café Chocolat, where I stand outside. Unfortunately, that's not open. And we're going to the front view. So there we go. There's Creams, and above it the Cathedral of Canterbury, and Sun Street on the corner over there, and what's now called the Draper's Arms, which for many years I remember being Deakins of Canterbury. Tim Deakin ran this. I'm sure he's not watching, but this is where I got my school uniforms when I was at school at St Edmunds of Canterbury. You see, there is some traffic around Canterbury. Obviously, essential journey is delivering pizzas, as everybody needs to stay at home and eat pizzas. I'm not wearing a mask today because I'm on my own in the streets of Canterbury. We start our journey here on the corner of Orange Street. Now, if you know the city well, you'll probably know Orange Street runs down to the Marlowe Theatre down there and the Seven Stars. Just a little aside there, the name Seven Stars comes from the expression half moon and 7 stars, used by smugglers to take contraband off the beach when the moon was at its half-mast point, and the 7 stars, the 7 sisters in the sky. Often smugglers used to arrange lights on the coastal shore to resemble these 7 stars, and that would draw sailors into the rocks, and they would smash against the rocks and the contraband would be taken off the sailors. Orange Street gets its name from William of Orange, who arrived in England in 1689 to take up the throne. He was William of Orange of the Spanish Low Countries. And we're going to come and stand and look on this corner structure here. We're going to wait for a bit more traffic to come through, because, again, vitally important information there as this car comes through. Very important there as he's travelling through. Looking down Palace Street, this was until about 1850, the main road to Ramsgate. And I remember when I first came here, it was still two-way traffic, although it's been pedestrianised since. And we're looking on the corner of this building called Siesta. If you look up above me on the corner, you can see this little red pump, which often people miss out on. It's the acorn pump, as we call it. If you look closely up at it, we'll try and I can't zoom in, as I say. The pump was originally located in the middle of the street, close to where I stand, and was removed in 1851 by a man called Dr. John Snow. He was the one who in London discovered cholera was carried in water, and he became the Queen's physician. He was one of the few people that actually understood the concept of transmissibility of viruses, and we know about that now more clearly than ever. But this was removed, and when they removed it from the middle of the street, which I bear down here, you can see in the street on the ground there, you can see the little triangle shape. That's where the city pump was. And although it was right in the middle of the road, horses and carts could make their way around it. But when they removed it, they found over 300 rats rotting inside the watercourses, and this was causing the cholera in the city of Canterbury. So by removing and closing the pumps, we saved quite a lot of lives. Now, the building on the corner here used to be a saddler's shop, and it was opened in 1868 by a man called John Harrison. John Harrison was the great-grandson of a man called John Harrison, who gave us the marine chronographer. He was a Norfolk reed cutter who in his spare time made watches and clocks. And if we look down here, we can actually see the foundation stone of John Harrison. Look down there, you can just see it there. Just see it there. John Harrison, 1868. John Harrison himself was a saddle maker, and we know that the Harrison family worked with the Williamson family to make saddles for the artillery and the cavalry. The cavalry were located here in Canterbury for quite a long time, and we know that the saddles made here at this shop were used at the Battle of Sevastopol and at Crimea. So the time that thinking of Florence Nightingale became a nurse. Although, of course, at that time nursing was regarded as a second-class occupation, only for poor people. But those saddles were used also at the ride of the Battle of the Charge of the Light Brigade, where so few ever returned. It was maybe a futile battle now, but the saddles were actually made here in Canterbury, so we should be quite proud of that. We're going to cross the road slightly over here to look at Cafe Chambers. The owner of Cafe Chambers has probably come on here at some point and let us know that she's here. It was in this property in about 2005 that I started writing my book, which is Haunted Canterbury, which will be trying to broadcast at some point in the future. It was originally called the Mayflower Inn when I first came here, but kindly the car is going to park right in the middle of it, just to make it impossible to everybody to film it. It's obviously a vitally important journey. And I'm going to make my way across the road just to have a look at the inscription of the old inn. It's here that Robert Cushman, the local deacon, hired the Mayflower in around 1602, but they didn't sail for America until 1620. Any Americans watching will obviously know the story of the Mayflower and the settlers that settled in America, but the true story is often overtaken by all the sort of bump that goes with it, sort of things like Third Thursday in November, which is when they landed. The original idea was that the Mayflower, along with 30 other ships, would sail from Plymouth in Hampshire down across towards the Isles of Scilly and then out to the west. They didn't actually know where America was, they didn't have really good maps, and they hired people called privateers to do their navigation for them. They were told by Cushman to be paid in diamonds, rubies and precious stones. I think it was a bit of a gamble. He basically knew that people who came back from the New World seemed to be very wealthy, and in this case they only found out halfway across the journey that there were only a few bits of cloth and corn over in America. Of course, it wasn't called America then, it was the New World, and there was a hope that the whole world was going to be a much better place for them. Now, when eventually they landed at Plymouth Rock, only a few of these ships actually made it. A lot of them died on the journey across. Around 15 were lost at the Isles of Scilly in a great storm. Others turned back halfway into the Atlantic when the crew found out there wasn't any diamonds, rubies or precious stones. And they... oh, hi, Linda. Be as long as you can. The crossing wasn't without trials, and we know that when they eventually got to the... actually aiming at a place called Jamestown in Virginia, but when they got close to Jamestown, they were blown 180 miles north in a storm, and their ship smashed on the Plymouth Rock. That's why they settled their place at Plymouth, New Hampshire, as it is now. Now, I'm not going to go up too much with the American colonies, but the chap, Robert Cushman, who hired the Mayflower, did return to Canterbury and died here. So he travelled with the colonists and came back. He was a wanted man. You probably heard the expression an all ports bulletin, or APB, the Americans call it. That was actually first issued for Robert Cushman, who was a wanted man. Remember, the Pilgrim Fathers weren't Protestants, they were radical Catholics who wanted to basically worship Catholicism in their own special way. At that time, Catholicism was illegal in England, made illegal around 1550 under law, and that was as a result of the Reformation, and it wasn't legalised again until 1823. So when you see a Catholic church in England, generally it's a recycled Protestant church, or possibly an old Catholic church being reconsecrated. And we often think, well, it's just the same religion, but there's a lot more to it than that. Now we're going to make our way down to the other side of the road again now. luckily, because of the quietness of the roads, we can get across without being run over. Although, having said that, of course, there's a good line of traffic coming down the street. Got another vitally important journey there. And looking back the other way, we're looking at the city kitchen shop, which is a very pretty building if you look above it. Often we never look above our heads. You can see the birds flying there. Lovely warm sunny day in Canterbury. We're very lucky with the weather. This building was at one time a house of ill repute. There were plenty of houses of ill repute in the city of Canterbury, and that upper balcony was used by the ladies of the night to attract clients' attention. Now, you might have heard the expression shufti, often used by Del Boy in Only Fools and Horses, have a shufti. It actually comes from the old Farsi word, which is used to mean to have a look. And that expression came from the felucca boys who used to line the Suez Canal when English girls were going out to India to meet their spouses. Generally arranged marriages between a rich English girl and an English civil servant in Mumbai or something like that. When they travelled out, they used to book a port out cabin and a starboard home cabin. That's how they get the expression posh, port out, starboard home. The reason being that when you book your cabins, you want a cooler cabin on the way out to India. And because the sun rises in the east, that's the port side, and it sets in the west, that's the starboard side, that's the cooler cabin to rest on the way home. So port out, starboard home, posh. And the word shufti came from the fact that the felucca boys used to stand on the banks of the Suez and lift their dish dashes and expose their willies to young ladies coming past who had never seen something that massive. They go, shufti, shufti, missus, then lift their dish dashes and they go, oh, Lavinia, do you see this horrible, huge thing? We don't know exactly what they said, but that's where the word comes from. A lot of Indian words have arrived in the English language because of the civil service in India. Words like veranda and bungalow, jodhpur, and even the word punk, which we regard as being somebody who's not very good. Punk comes from punkawalla, which is a man who used to wave a fan over the rich people. And so punk comes from punkawalla, just means air mover, punka. And there's lots of, we say Farsi, but there's every other language in the sun has been incorporated in the English language. It's really funny to look down the street there back towards the Sun Hotel in Sun Street, just there in the middle of the picture. And so the city has changed very little over the years and lots of history still beneath our feet. When you look up the very top floor of the building next door, do you see how the roof line is slightly over the front of the dormer window up there? There's so many of this refaced building structure, and most of the properties in this street are faced with something called mathematical hang tile. If you've visited the city before, you'll notice that a lot of the buildings aren't actually built of brick. They're made of wood and then faced with this mathematical hang tile. The hang tile was first introduced at around 1679 after the King Charles II introduced brick tax, which was levied at 2 pennies per 1,000 bricks, which may not seem a lot of money, but if you had a building like the House of Parliament or somewhere, you'd be charged a fortune. It was only levied where you could see the brick. If the brick was covered with weatherboarding, which is quite a common way of covering buildings around here, there was no tax to pay. But if you had a medieval property, but you want to look more modern, you want to face it with this mathematical hang tile. So these properties in this street are early medieval, but faced with this mathematical hang tile. Now, we're going to make our way down a little further towards the cheese shop of Canterbury. You can see the independent cheesemonger there. And if you remember cheese from your childhood, people used to eat it in England. And cheese can be available here. Lovely Stilton cheese they do in this property here. I'm going to walk across slightly in the quietness. Well worth popping into if you get a chance. They're doing Shropshire Blue for a change. Only $2.60 for 100 grams. She's waving to you there, the international people. There you go, thank you very much. We're going live on Facebook, so you can say hello to Facebook. Hi, Facebook. Yeah, she is. We will come and have a look. Well, do you mind if we come in now? Is that all right? I'm going to put my mask on. Yeah, all right. Lovely selection of cheeses here. Look at that, lovely. Oh, I'm hungry already.
Cheese. I haven't got my softies out.
No, I won't take a sample because I'm going to come back later on. But just interview the cheesemonger. That looks lovely. What cheese we got there?
We've got Baron Bigod from Suffolk, and this is a goat brie.
Oh, right.
I've got other softies as well. It's just that they're underneath.
Right, no.
And then I've got the local ones like Ashmore, Dalgate Dumpy.
Yeah.
This one over here is a nice local Winterdale short. It's beautiful cheddar, good price.
Looks lovely, yeah, lovely.
$2.60 for 100 grams.
Right. Well, I'll be in later on to
and
sample.
some lovely Kentish Blue.
Kentish Blue, lovely.
Or
Yeah.
classic Colston Bassett still
Oh,
to
lovely.
Shropshire Blue.
That's lovely. That bash. I had that just around Christmas time. So
Did you?
we'll catch up later on. All right. Chin chin. We'll come and see you later on. Okay.
Oh, that's good of you. Thank you.
Pleasure. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So there we go. Some local traders still trading as best we can. Now, as we come down here, you look at just look at the glass on the building above Vicky Lord Hair Care and Piper's Opticians. You see the slight sort of variation of the glass. You can see the reflections. It's not sort of straight mirror-like reflections. That's because the glass itself is old, original glass. This is from about 1850, and the glass panes themselves individually slotted together. It's now empty, sadly, Vicky Lord. I had a look around it when they were building it, or rebuilding it. I look through there if you can see that. It's all bare and empty there. And on the other side of the street, we've got this rather nice terrace property. You can see at the very top of there, a nice bit of greenery sticking out the green drain pipe. So obviously a bit of a bird has dropped his droppings there. I do wonder what it's like to live in these properties, but there's a very good jeweller here called Ortwin Tyson. As you can see here, he makes bespoke rings and things. He's often seen working in his workshop at the back there. He came on my ghost tour a couple of years ago as well. Now, anybody remember Rupert the Bear? You probably do. It's our local sort of gained hero here. If you look above number 52 here, you can see the name Mary Tourtel. This is where she was born. And many people just don't notice this plaque, which is pretty hardly seen at all. In the summertime, there's a big hanging basket here, so we can't see anything at all. But this is where she was born. She's buried in St Martin's Churchyard, up at the back of Christchurch University, just off St Martin's Hill. And she married the sub-editor of the Daily Express newspaper, who died in about 1917. And she, at that time, was publishing a little cartoon of Rupert the Bear, which you can see the character of Rupert the Bear in his little yellow trousers. He's a little white bear, and for many years there was a lot of suggestion that he was a racist bear, but it was simply that in 1929 the cost of brown ink to make his skin brown, which he was a little brown bear, was removed to save money, and they became a little white bear. So it was the only thing in the Daily Express newspaper that actually was colour, the cartoon, and bits of a sort of poem underneath it, which odd sort of shape and face. Look at the doorsteps, though. If you obviously look at the doorsteps there, see that's worn down over time. So it's a piece of granite that's been worn down over hundreds of years of foots and steppings therein. Now we're going to make our way just across the road slightly over here towards Turn Again Lane, which is obviously a lovely name for a lane. And if we look up at the edge of Turn Again Lane, we can see the sign up there, Turn Again Lane, quite clearly. Now, I'm going to go down to the far end of the lane down here, as we do, walking gently and carefully so I don't trip over and make an arse of myself. Catch myself a mid-double chin. You can notice up there they restored this building here, which is the Children's Society shop for many years. I raised money for the Children's Society in the 1980s, dressed up as Christopher Marlowe, of all people, and went around the pubs. Pretty stupid idea at the age of 18, dressed as a pilgrim. But raised about £300 one night, just begging sort of cash off people, and gave it to Trish, Trisha, who ran the shop, and she presented it to the Children's Society. So I'm quite proud of fundraising and dressing up like an idiot, so you can see where I got it from. And this is the stable door. They've really made it really nice there. It was in a very poor condition. If you look closely, you can see some of the graffiti here, which are made by schoolboys on the way to school. If you see these down striation marks here, these are the styluses used by schoolboys on their way to class. So they sharpen their styluses here against the wall, so they're still here years later. And again, these sort of scratch marks here, these are stylus scratches. So this is from the 1840s or so. Not every child, of course, had a free education. You can see again stylus scrapings here. Always look out for stylus scrapings when you come to the City of Canterbury. It's always fascinating to me when you see these little things. It's not really graffiti per se, but you can see them quite clearly here. See AINT and a sort of diamond crossplate here. See the names here. AI, and a big scratch all the way through here. So it's pretty sharp. So all the way down, there's another one here, all the way through. These aren't maker's cuts. These are simply cut directly through. And there's another marking here. I can see what that says. Hoise, perhaps. I think it's probably a more later one. This one is somebody's pin number, possibly. It's been carved into the brickwork, and more down here. You see these sort of W shapes down here? You see these? It's fascinating. That's the bits of Canterbury we tend to miss out on. You don't tend to look. There's somebody's done an A there quite clearly. So I've got Archibald or Arthur. So possibly there was a a way out to school from here, and more of them down here, more bits of graffiti. So, JB, is it? What's that date there? Can you see a date? Looks like JB, doesn't it? Or 96, perhaps, 1896. As we go down the far end of this lane, this road used to lead out to the River Stour, where the weavers who inhabited down here used to wash their cloths. But in around 1760, they put this new forge at the end down here, which you see up there, people doing their ironing. And look up in the corner, this old coach house has been converted by an architect, and he's used his architectural set square to give an image of the underpass of this little lean-to window here. Often missed out on, you wouldn't necessarily know that was here, so I just sort of pointed out. This thing above you, the white structure, is the back of the Foresters' Hall and the Freemasons, not the Freemasons, the Oddfellows' Hall. And the Oddfellows, of course, founded in Manchester because there were too many guilds in the city of Manchester. Not enough guilds, in fact, to cover all the guilds of Manchester. And so there were people who weren't in a guild called the Oddfellows. People are outside of a guild. The Oddfellows provided them safety and security and also a form of pension. All the guilds of Canterbury used to meet in Guildhall Street, in the old Guildhall, and they would set the price of linens and silver and other things. Now, these cottages down here, which you might have seen from the other street, had a very nice view of Bellharry Tower there. These cottages were medieval cottages, but in around 1650, when French refugees came here, called Huguenots, they added on an extra weaving hall on the cottages above. And what we see above you with these ladder windows, they're called. These ladder windows allow you to get extra sunlight in. They basically reach either side. And the Huguenots who traded here were usually all families. They were a very insular community. They were French-speaking and they were Protestant. The Huguenots, however, gave Canterbury a really rich weaving history. We had a few weavers in Canterbury before them, but they really were the proper weavers and haberdash and dyers of the city. And many of them remain in the city, so much so that they have a service on every third Sunday in the Cathedral of Canterbury, a Huguenot service in French Protestant service. And we know from records that around 4 families lived in each one of these little cottages here. They're quite low. If you look at the ceiling rafters, you come out here a bit closely here, English oak, maybe not heavily restored, there's some sort of a quality there, but quite low down. These windows below us here, which have now got glass in them, originally been folded out to allow them to trade on their, what's called the trading floor. You don't think of the trading floor from the stock exchange, but originally these windows folded out onto a couple of legs, and that would be the front of their shop, basically. The middle floor is where they slept, 4 families to a cottage, head to toe, possibly with 4 bunks. And the upper chamber, these families all got together and shared the weaving hall together. So probably 16 families working together in weaving. Now, the unmarried daughters of the Huguenot families used to sleep in the attic rooms. They would often spin night and day away. They're called spinstera or spinster, unmarried daughter. It's a Huguenot word meaning that they could give their daughters a skill, meaning they wouldn't have to marry some horrible English local oik, and they could run independently. So in those days when arranged marriages were created, often they were forced to marry somebody who they didn't like or didn't want to get close to. And in this case, we have a fine example of some lovely Huguenot cottages. So if you come down Turnagain Lane in future, look out for these little cottages, and also look at this one down the far end here, which is number 10, odd numbering. You'll see a little white cross, a Protestant cross. If you ever saw the Blackadder programmes, the middle one, you'll see the white cross, the Huguenot doorway there. So it's a fascinating little place here, well worth popping down to. And again, you can see Bellharry above us there, and protected as the seagulls come flying over looking for chips. Now, as we stand on this corner here, we look directly across to the Archbishop's Palace over there. You see there's a little white flagpole there. If there's a flag flying on the flagpole, it means the Archbishop's in residence. And the palace we see before us, built in 2 stages, 1665 the far side, and this side, which is the slightly newer section, 1850. And the Archbishop is regularly in residence. He was here a couple of, more than a year ago now, but I was standing here with a couple of people, and the Archbishop was waiting for a pizza delivery, I think, because the Domino's driver parked exactly where I stand, and was on the phone to the Archbishop of Canterbury, not knowing he was the Archbishop. He thought it was a pub. And the Domino's driver said, yeah, I'm looking for a pub called the Archbishop of Canterbury. And the Archbishop said, I'm not a pub, I am the Archbishop of Canterbury. And the driver said quite clearly, well, your pizza's here. And he walked across through those gates directly ahead of us there, and came to collect his pizza, looked at me in my ridiculous outfit and said, I never feel overdressed in the city with people like you around. I just bowed and said, Your Grace, and he walked back to his pizza. That's probably one of the reasons he lives in Lambeth Palace. There's probably better pizza deliveries up there. Now, if we look at this structure here, this was once a little pub. You can see the wall ties on the edge, which hold the walls together. We know that the husband and wife that lived in this property used to beat each other as well, as we saw in other places. We'll cover that later on. And also down here, you can see a coal hole. See a little coal hole down here? There's very few of these left in Canterbury. But the coal chute is where you used to throw the coal down. So remember coalmen, years ago, used to have a sack of coal on their back and they used to come around and deliver the coal. And obviously grateful of coalmen. Can't burn coal anymore, can we? When we had smokeless fuel and the smog of London. Now, looking down the street, you can see the sunshine sitting there rather nicely. Lovely blue sky again. We're going to make our way just slightly down here to this rather weird shop, which I'm not quite sure is ever going to trade. It's called Smile Le Beau. If you look in the window there, you'll see these rather weird-looking donuts and things. And this is a Japanese family that make these things out of plastic of some kind. I'm not quite sure what you want to do with these things because they look so tasty, you want to eat them. There's a big sign on them saying, don't eat it because it's not food, but there we go. See, all food models are fake food. Well, somebody's going to buy it, I guess. I'm going to visit their YouTube channel. Now, I'm going to come down the other side of the road just so we can have a look at the old Archbishop's Palace. I'm going to see if we can actually get a peek over the wall. I'm going to stick the camera up there. You can see up there. Oh, I got some reach up there. Can you see his palace up there? Probably can't hear me either. But looking from here, we can turn across to see the poor priest's house of St Alphege. It's a very pretty structure. It was also called the Tudor House for many years. And if we look at the side, you've got the little tiny windows on the side called sight windows. You see the little windows up there? They're sight windows so the congregational priest has sight of his congregation as they come down the street. There's lots of carvings on this building. Some of it probably not original, but some of it possibly original. Look up there. There's the face of my ex-girlfriend. She's got a beard, moustache, everything a man wants. She had hair all the way down her back. Nothing on red, just the way down her back. And this is the face of what's called a grotesque. A grotesque is not a gargoyle. A gargoyle is particularly something similar to this with a water spout in it. So if you see this elsewhere, it's called a grotesque, and it's designed to ward off evil spirits and possibly linked to the pagan religion. Look up above it there, you can see the structure is very clean and tidy. It's actually for sale at the moment. If you're looking to buy it, it's around £600,000. Doesn't seem that much money. But it does, of course, have the downside that windows you can see over here get broken. I don't think these windows are original, but they are very nicely made to look original because I've seen a photograph here earlier on in the 1950s when this was just a plain arched window. So maybe they've done it up to make it look more sort of medieval. But the city of Canterbury is full of little buildings like this. If you look above the window here, you can see the White Rose of York. And that, we assume, was because if it was built before the War of the Roses, they had to cover themselves and their bases for whichever side won. So that's the White Rose of York. And then on the other side, of course, we have the Red Rose of Lancaster. When Henry Tudor won the Battle of Bosworth Field, he joined the Rose of York and Lancaster together to create what's called the Tudor Rose. He, of course, himself wasn't royal, so he married the King's sister, Elizabeth of York, who was regarded as the prettiest girl in England at the time, and that turned out to be probably one of the best moves he ever made. If you look closely at the doorway, you can see the sign for the letterbox, clearly there, a nice big door handle to knock yourself into. But if you look closely here, like this little brass plaque, you can see the name St Alphege Priest House, or the Poor Priest House, and it says built in 1250. That's amazingly old, isn't it? 1250, that's 770 years old already. And a nice old bolt holding the door frame in place. Look out there. Now above the doorway, though, right in the middle here, we've got a carving here of oak wood. If you see up the little acorn in the middle there, most of this wood is probably recycled timber. The lower section here has phases of the moon, and this is to represent the waxing, the waning of the moon. This is what regarded as something called a starboard side of a ship. We think it's a ship's timber because it has rope in it. See the rope symbol here? That usually means recycled timber. Most of the timber of this structure and other buildings of the city are brought in by people called moonrakers. Have you heard of moonrakers? You might have heard of the film by James Bond, Moonraker. But Ian Fleming was living on the Romney Marsh when he stopped into a pub in Appledore and came across a group of men sitting at the bar getting drunk. And being Ian Fleming, he just bought them all a drink and said, come and sit at my table, tell me about what you do, to give them ideas for new stories. And they said they were moonrakers. Their job was to rake the beach of Romney by moonlight to gather flotsam and jetsam. And it seems these people had been on the Romney Marsh for hundreds and thousands of years, bringing their wood into the city of Canterbury, where carvers would carve the story of the wood into the structure. And so here we see oak wood with an acorn in it, the image of the sea above. You see this sort of this swirly image here. This is the image of the sea, down below ship's timber, so recycled ship's timber that's been at sea, made of oak, English oak. Now, at the level above, there's a piece of possibly rosewood, and then at the very top up there is Irish timber. It's got four-leaf clovers in it, but again, that could just be symbolism to be good luck to the builders. And on the other side, of course, another little marker up there for the, see up there, oops, use my stick, that marker for the historic building of Kent, and on the corner, another image of another ex-girlfriend of mine. Not. You can see their little boobs. These are probably just to warn local pilgrims not to get involved with naughty pilgrims and dirty old prostitutes. If you look up here, you can see again that sight window quite clearly there, although it might well all be faked up. The building itself is actually much bigger on the inside than it does in this little frontage here, and although you can't really see it here, that is the skylight to the undercroft. There's a stone undercroft, which I think now is just a kitchen. Across the road over here, we can have a look into the Archbishop's garage, which is where, although you can't see on a glazed glass, but that's the Archbishop's garage in there. And on the other side of the street, we see the wall of the vestry of the poor priest's house of St Alphege. This was graffitied over recently by some charming people who put some horrible, dirty words on it, and it's been repainted over. I always thought the Archbishop was the one doing the graffiti, but couldn't read it. It was all in Greek. It's all Greek to me. Now, the structure of St Alphege Church is fascinating ways. It's a jolly old church. St Alphege was an Archbishop of Canterbury. He spent most of his time in Lambeth. You often think of Lambeth as being a sort of bit of a grotty area now, but it was a very popular area. And Lambeth Palace is where the Archbishop remains this day, closer to spearmint rhinos, I think. As we cross over here, we're going to have a look at some of the intelligentsia coming down the street, so walking one leg and another. The structure, which has the vestry door on it, if you look closely, you can see the material is actually what's called napped flint. It's basically a piece of round flint snapped in two. Yes, as what you can't smell here is the lovely aroma of cannabis, and those three lovely lads, and they think it's really funny that I'm live streaming. How sad am I? But I hope you're enjoying the live stream, and I'll continue regardless. Hi, Paula. Watching it, it is fascinating, isn't it? It's the city of Canterbury. What I do miss is the really strong cannabis. They must be smoking a good bit of skunk in there. Makes you really proud. I mean, of course, that's the modern way, isn't it? It's the post-COVID way. To make a napped flint wall, you basically put render on and then squish the napped flint into it. This is the way they rebuilt most of the churches in England around 1850, when they expanded most of the Church of England to allow everybody to have a congregational seat. Until that time, ladies worshipped in a chapel to one side called a lady chapel, and gentlemen sat in the main sort of refectory area, and they often had God, the word is now, I've forgotten, got my script, a balcony around the top for ladies to watch and look down on the service below. But in 1850, they were so worried about the resurgence of Catholicism that they built and expanded all these churches. So if you have a church like I do in Harbledown, covered in the same napped flint, it's because it was all rebuilt at the same time to allow people to come to the city of Canterbury and to other places and worship as best they could. Americans have something similar to this. It's called obsidian, and this is just flint, usually from the chalk bedrock in the city. If you look around the very edge carving here, you can see here in the 1990s where the City Council in the Wisdom tried to recreate napped flint render. It's not quite the same quality. It's almost as if somehow the skills were lost somewhere, as if apprenticeships just disappeared. But you can barely tell it apart. And I think, always think, look closely here, you can see, I think it's that bit there where you can see where he put his finger mark in and say, right, that's it. Oh, there it is. That's where it's done. Friday night, down the pub. And they were probably headed down the street to where we come to now, the old Bell and Crown. And the Bell and Crown is proudly standing on the corner of St Alfred's Lane. St Alfred, of course, we mentioned he was an archbishop. He was stoned to death by the Vikings. Turns out that he didn't let the people of London starve. Instead, he took all the cattle of the city of London and fed the people of London so they didn't starve as they're being raided by the Vikings. And when the Vikings came to collect their Danegeld, they took the bones that he'd used to boil up to make stew for his people, and they stoned him to death with the bones. Now, St Alfred's Lane on the corner has this very pretty structure, and we can just see up there on the top floor where the word Alfred's Lane is. You can see a bricked-in window, and bricked-in windows are quite common in the Georgian period when people were playing glass tacks. Glass tacks are so prohibitively expensive, it was sometimes cheap to brick your windows in and pay that bloody brick tax than it was to pay the glass tax, and that's how we get the expression daylight robbery. So next time you come to a building like this and it's bricked in, it may not be original, but in this case I think it is, and they bricked in the windows to save on glass tax. It's only one window, but it seems to make a big bit of difference. If you look at the etched windows in the lower section here, you can see the name George Beer and Company. It's one of the many brewers in the city of Canterbury. We had at one time 365 pubs within the city walls. At the far end down there, just beyond the window, you can see another arched doorway. We're told at one time in the 1670s, when this place was still trading, well, still trading now, but when it sort of started trading, that this area at the end, which is Edwardian, was open to the elements, and that at some point cattle and horses, not so much horses, but cattlemen would walk in with their cattle on ropes and walk out to the bar and get their beer, but still holding onto their cattle before going to market at the Bullstake Market. Now, if you look at the edge, we talked about graffiti earlier on. It became quite a thing here to leave your mark, and these are more recent ones. But we sort of moan about graffiti. These are sort of quite interesting, although I'm not quite sure they're very artistic. All the names of people: Phil and Tur or Fur and Freak and Zeph and Toby and Stefan and Jimmy. Anyway. This, when I first came here, was run by a chap called Charlie Passy. I remember Charlie Passy, who did fantastic shepherd's pies. We can still see the sign there. And he used to put silly signs out the front of his place to cheer people up, including this one here. Take notice that vagabonds, dog stealers, horse thieves, rapscallions, scoundrels, liars, and especially bursars will not be served on these premises. Bursars, of course, referring to King's School of Canterbury's bursar, whose bursary used to be over there, but I think they moved it slightly. So if we look from here, where the chimney stacks are, that's the Archbishop's Palace. And when I first came here, that window closest to us, just below the sort of spiral chimney pot, was the Archbishop's bathroom. He used to wave out of the window there to people passing by. I haven't seen the current one do that, but he's hardly ever here, as I say. And if you look at the top towers up there, I can't really zoom in, but you can see how clean they look after the restoration, the Northwest Transept. And to the other side over here, we have... that's the ladies' college, I think, from King's School. And then most of everything else down here is the Archbishop's old palace. If you look at the edge up here, if I can point here, this bit here, this is what's left of the old tithe palace. It's called a tithe palace. It's where they put 10% of the wealth of the congregation in corn form into these stores. That's what they were originally. If you look over here, you can see a little mullioned window up at the top level of the old palace. If I can use my pointy stick, it's that one there. And in that one there we find this is Tudor brick in place. Oh, he's videoing me. God, it's illegal. I'm going to bring him up there, skeezer. Now, it's interesting, the style of these buildings. I don't think everybody remembers pubs in the old days. Well, you're too young, aren't you? But there were two types of pubs. There was the main body of the pub over there was called the Jug and Bottle. You get your beer delivered to you in a jug or a bottle. A bottled beer from another brewery. Jugged ale was tenderly poured straight from the barrel into a jug, and then you'd serve yourself into your tankard. This smaller section over here is called the snug, mainly reserved for ladies and gentlemen sitting separately in comfy little sort of snug area. So that's why it's called a snug. But I remember when I used to go out drinking with Dad, there were often a few pubs left that had a snug and a saloon. saloon came from the French word salon. Look above the Korean cowgirl here, and you can see the lip of an extra wall added on to make it look more modern. You can see the frontage of the structure quite clearly here, overlips the original roof shape here. And there's quite a lot of that in Canterbury. So there's this Regency thing of making all the buildings look more modern. But we do actually have a solid brick wall in front here as opposed to mathematical hang tile. And I've not been the Korean cowgirl for a long time, but it's nice to see that some plants are growing here in the little butts here, although there's plenty of flea, fly, flow, flums flying around as well. And across the road over here, again, we're very lucky with the weather. It's actually quite nice and warm now. When I started, it was a bit chilly, but it's a nice afternoon. Now, looking at the other side of the street over there, we see Conquest House. And again, if you look at the very edge of Conquest House, just in between the two, you can see the lip line between the frontage of the new property. This is a new frontage, this bit here, added on in 1620 for the arrival of a man called King Charles. Well, actually, King Charles came in 1625 and married Henrietta Maria of Austria. You might have heard of the expression, the Princess of the Pea. That was Henrietta Maria of Austria. And we're going to have a closer look at the building now. So this is a modern frontage by architectural standards, 1625. It's called a 17th century frontage. It's made of English oak. A fascinating place. Sadly, it's not open to the public anymore. It used to be. But we're going to have a little rummage around the edge of it anyway. Looking at the structure, we can see the lattice windows. Now, these lattice windows have individual panes of glass joined by lead lattice. In the very middle, you can see these, if I come down this one here, you see this middle bit here. I'm going to stick my stick in there, but that basically holds everything together. The advantage of latticing like this, it means that if there is energy waves in the case of bombing, which they wouldn't have known at the time, it will withstand slight pressure. So if we look at a slightly oblique angle here, we can see how it goes in and out here. Now, the Victorians added in, I can just really see it, there's some little bits of metal in the inside which stopped the window being completely caved in. But this damage was caused in 1942 in what's called the Baedeker Raid, when the German government bombed Canterbury. The pretty places of England were hit by a guidebook, well, written by a man called Franz Baedeker in 1931, and Hitler used the guidebook to pick on the pretty place of England. You can see more clearly the damage down this front side here. You can see again there, a slightly oblique view. It sort of dips in slightly here and comes out again there. So all these windows have been badly damaged by bomb blast. It's very sad to look at it like that. But look up above there, you can see the mullions up here. See the mullions up there? You can see quite clearly images of oak leaves, again marking out as being made of English oak. Very beautifully carved. If that really is original or if that's been added on, I'm not quite sure. But if you look at the footings down here, you can quite clearly see the stone base, and then again mullions sticking out to hold it all in place, and the flagstone floor, possibly of the original building. Now, we know that the structure within it, called the King's Stone House, has been here since before the Norman Conquest. And although I can't take you inside, I can describe to you what it is inside, and I will post afterwards images of what it looked like inside, but it's called the King's Chamber. The King himself slept in an upper bedchamber called a mezzanine, and the Lord Privy Seal on a floor just slightly below that. The Lord Privy Seal's job was to protect the King's last stand, and the King himself often slept in a box bed. A box bed was simply a bed basically made out of a chest, and you'd crawl inside the chest and put the chest closed inside, and then it would stop anybody getting inside it. Originally made of a solid oak trunk of wood, that's why we called trunk, because it's made of a trunk of a tree carved out, and the lid would slide open, and once inside you could keep yourself warm. But some kings didn't like that idea and preferred to sleep under a canopy. It's called a canopy bed, and these canopy beds eventually, or originally started with bits of canopy being looped from the ceiling to catch bugs and spiders. They fell out the roof spaces. Some people don't like sleeping like that, and so this canopy would just catch the droppings of animals as they shat on you during your sleep. And eventually they put 4 posts under this canopy to support it more properly. That became known as a 4-poster bed, and the mattresses themselves are horsehair, so they'd be full of bugs. So you might have heard the expression, sleep tight, don't let the bugs bite. And there were, when I first grew up at school, we had horsehair mattresses too. They're very itchy, made of Hessian, horrible things. Well, you know, people say posh people, I don't know, I understand it. But I can't really show you in here, but just inside, above the fireplace, is, if you look at this slight... you can't really see it from there. There's an image above the fireplace of the Stuart crest with the name Oni Swaki Mani Pons, do bad to others who do bad unto you, and Ich dien, I serve, of the 3 white feathers of the Black Prince. Now, again, we can see this in the reflections of the window here. It's not quite accurate because each pane of glass individually made. The glass itself was made in Venice, and it's Venetian lattice glass, very rare and quite expensive. But it was from this building, as you can just slightly see there, the place on December the 29th, 1170, that from this place 4 knights travelled across the road there to the Archbishop of Canterbury's palace. The palace itself is not exactly as it was in Becket's day, but it's certainly the same location, and directly in the middle there's a huge archway which led through what is now called Shirley Hall. Behind that, in the Archdeacon's garden, is the remains of a mulberry tree. Now, do you remember the nursery rhyme, round and round the mulberry bush in a cold and frosty morning? That was to remind children in the nursery of the death of Thomas Becket. The mulberry tree or bush is still in the precincts of the Cathedral of Canterbury, in the Archdeacon's garden. Ozzy, Mick and I went round to see it one day. I think you might remember that if he's watching. Hi, Ed. The doorway here is beautifully carved. Again, I think these carvings are slightly more recent, but still very pretty images of dragons of some kind breathing out silk. And the number there, 17 in Roman numerals, number 17. And the image of, we assume, connect. Oh, there you go. We lost you for a second there because the signal is specially designed by the Cathedral of Canterbury, so we don't have any connectivity. We'd much rather live in the 3rd century AD than actually have any connectivity in the city. Looking up above here again, you can see the mullioned windows again there. It's a very pretty structure. It's again for sale for about 1.2 million or something. Well worth snapping up, I think. You can see it's actually made of oak, solid old English oak wood. The extensions on the side here, lots of weevils and maggots have gone through there over the history of time. We're going to cross the road just slightly here, just to remember the death of Thomas Becket. When Thomas Becket was killed on December the 29th, we're told that the knights, Reginald Fitzurse, Hugh de Mulville, Richard le Breton and William de Tracy, spent the night in the cellars of this building, what's called the Undercroft. I've got pictures, which I'll post later on, of the Undercroft. Sadly, it's all empty now. But we know that they drank a bottle of Malmesbury wine, not a bottle, a barrel of Malmesbury wine each. And that was the king's own possession, the Malmesbury wine. And we know the next morning they took their horses through what is now a historic building in Kent. This is the stable yard entranceway to the stable block at the back. And they rode their horses across the road into the Archbishop's palace through this great doorway here. Either side of the great doorway you can see the bits of metal sticking out either side. They're brazier hooks where baskets of straw and oil were burned night and day to illuminate the entranceway. In the middle, in a restoration, they put in a crest of Thomas Becket, which is now the crest of the Archbishop of Canterbury. If you look at that crest there, you may not see too clearly, so I can't zoom in for some reason. And that crest shows a shield with a Y surplice on it. That's the Y shape in white, above which is a crown. And on the Y surplice, you can see the 4 blades, to remind you of the 4 blades that killed Thomas Becket. Without Thomas Becket, Canterbury probably wouldn't be here today. We know that before his execution, he addressed the night before his congregation, and he did warn them that he might die the next day. I think he knew it was coming. It wasn't a premonition. He knew it pissed people off at times. And he basically told his congregation to not defend him, let him die. He'd rather die a martyr and live forever than to die a boring death in bed. And so the congregation clergy did their best to protect him, but it was too late. When the knights rode across the road into this structure here, they hid their swords and cloaks on the mulberry tree and tied their horses up and walked in unarmed to the Archbishop to try and reason with them to lift the excommunications of the bishops of London, York and Salisbury so they could be back in London in time for breakfast. But the Archbishop wasn't going to have any of that. He sure as hell didn't want a free ride, and so he told them to bugger off. They returned to their swords and cloaks and rode hell-bent to kill the Archbishop, slicing their way through priests. The Archbishop was hidden by then inside the cathedral, and the door was locked. Legend has it that the hand of God came down and unbolted the door, allowing the horsemen to make their way through. And they found him on the steps on the way down to the Undercroft, where he was heading for Archbishop Augustine's tomb in the Undercroft, but they got him before he had a chance to go down there. He spun round, lifting his left hand, and said in a commanding voice, "You shall not take my life in this holy church." And reports say that Reginald Fitzurse said, "Be damned, you will die this day for your death of the king." And they sliced the side of his shoulder off, open to the rib cage, down to his his hip bone, and that scarred him. Well, he would have died, but he fell to the ground. They took another blow from the nape of his neck to the spine, down the spinal column into the coccyx, and then another blow across the top of his head, slicing the top of his head off. At that point, Becket was either dead or speaking French. We don't know for sure, but I'm sure he's probably spoke French anyway, since he was Norman after all. But following the death of Becket, they gathered bits and pieces of Becket together, the monks, and put as much of his blood as they could into a bucket because they knew it was going to become holy. When they were undressing him, they found he was wearing a hair shirt underneath his robes, and he hadn't washed, well, for most of his life, it seemed. He was crawling with pearls of God, or lice as we call them now, pearls of God. They marched off him 2 by 2, a sign of piety. Now, had Thomas Becket not died, we'd never had any pilgrims, and pilgrims to this day are now called tourists, or they were originally pilgrims. The reason the road widens at this point is to allow the traffic to come past and curve their way into the Archbishop Palace over there. So when you look at this point by the Canterbury Tandoori, you probably think to yourself, it's a bit wider here for some reason. That's the reason. So until they pedestrianised it, the road was, as you can see, quite wide for the main road down to Ramsgate. Now we're going to come into the sunny side of the street, as we used to direct our feet to the sunny side of the street. And as we do so, just look out the edge of the doorways there. Do you see the slightly darker portion there? That's where the guardhouses were built, originally to protect the Archbishop's Palace. They were removed at some point. Just have a quick look at the doorway itself. Again, it's not possibly original, but look down there, you can see the cobbles which are placed there to allow the horses' hooves to come in and not wear away too long. But the handles, rather nicely placed on here, are Tudor rose door handles. I mean, they might be new, but they're nice. But somebody's tried to make it look medieval. And again, leaded light added on the middle there as well. Now, as we come down here, the stone is cornerstone from Normandy, and it's beautifully carved. We're going to continue down here towards a place called Number 22. Looking to the other side of the street over there, these are modern buildings being put inside. So above the Canterbury Tandoori, that's a modern building. You can see the roof line comes just slightly shy of the buildings next to it. If I look up there, see that section there? So it doesn't actually join the building next to it, so there's a gap down that side there. They try to match it up. And you'll see that quite commonly in Canterbury. Above Number 22 down there, you can see another sign of that, where the building roof shape misses quite clearly, the frontage quite clearly. So down the side there is a sort of gap, so much so that the old bakery, as you see there, is the main way into the upstairs rooms. That was an antique shop for many years, owned by a chap called Laurie, and he lost his position here, and he's now a sub-prior of St John's, the almshouse, or Jesus Hospital, actually, I have to be sure. On the other side, you can also see the word herringbone. See up there, herringbone? And again, you can see 3 different roof shapes. The roof shape originally of the medieval property behind. Then over here we have an isosceles triangle roof shape. And in the very front we have an equilateral roof shape design of triangle. That's because the architects started using Pythagorean theorem to make proper triangles and proper joints. Now the structure itself we think was probably a wine merchant shop. And I'll just stand here for a minute, let the people go past. If you look at the outside, you can just about see, you might have to zoom in a bit, the carvings of grapes in the upper section. At the very top, again, we can't zoom in because it won't allow me to, but at the very top, if I point it out, so when you come along and have a look, in the very middle there is the shape of the devil himself. The suggestion was that if you drank too much wine, you met the devil himself. And although during lockdown I've now discovered what the best breakfast wine is, shouldn't really drink too much wine, apparently it's not very good for you. It's not really for walking around in. Now the windows above are the weaving halls that the Huguenots would have used. So even though they were wine merchants, they were still done a bit of weaving on the side, because not every day was a good sales day for wine. And we also look, you can see in the darkness here, look up in the corner, that little shape up there, you can see the face of the husband, and on the other side of the wife of this structure here. So she and he have both got on their collars a rough collar. You might have heard the expression to be caught in the rough. We often think of a golfing expression. Originally it was a against the law to wear a rough collar from 1590 onwards, because wearing a rough collar was a sign of the Spanish, and Spanish people regarded as spies. Anybody wearing a rough collar would be sentenced to death. There's very odd laws around in England at that time. They're still on the statutes, some of them, most are removed, of course. Every 10 years or so, the Lord Chief Justice tends to go through the statutes and removes the silly ones. One which is still in exact is the law of wearing full suit of armour in the House of Parliament. If you are, that is a treasonable offence, and you can be executed. So I'm hoping maybe we could start a little campaign to get Boris to wear a full suit of armour in Parliament so he can get executed. But he's doing his best, I guess. Again, you can see the overhanging jetted frontage of these joists here. There were suggestions that the Huguenots, when they built these properties, built them with the intention of sleeping in between the rafters. And the gap between the rafters is exactly the width, supposedly, of a Huguenot bottom. So a fat Huguenot bottom and a thin Huguenot bottom, maybe the husband and wife sitting together. But it's possible that they had no measuring equipment and just used as best they could. Now, as we continue down to our final sections, down towards the end of Palace Street, I haven't been talking too fast. You're probably saying, God, he don't know, babble on. But there's a rather interesting terrace of a few properties here. These are Georgian, alongside it another Georgian properties up here. There's rather nice plaque on this one here next to Cosmo China, which is run by the daughter of that chap who gave us Bankpuss. If you look here, there's a lovely door knocker on her anyway. I just think that should be brightly painted up at some point. But there's a nice plaque here. It's something we should all think about in this day and age. Peace on thy house, O passer-by. Well, we're going to cross the road here just slightly so we can get a view of the corner gate, which is called Mint Yard Gate on Palace Street, the very end of Palace Street. This becomes the borough around the corner here, and there are some interesting curved properties again with mathematical hang tile to make it look more modern. But then we come to the building that we all recognise in the city of Canterbury, which is also called the King's School Shop. It was for many years the tuck shop of the King's School. For some time it's called the Old Curiosity Shop, and we also know that it was heavily restored. I've got images of this from the 1900s where it didn't have all these windows added on, but the property itself was built around 1602 for a man called Sir John Rolfe. Sir John Rolfe was the cousin... Oh, just the wrong way down a one-way street, it's fine. That's fine, just reverse out at speed, that's fine. You can go where you like, can't you? Oh, look, somebody didn't agree with him. Odd that, isn't it? Makes you proud that one is going to go round again now. That's right, anyway you like. Now, the structure itself was actually built solid, straight, true and square, but in around 1850 the chimney stack was undermined by the fire department, located in King Street on a corner building, which is now an ophthalmic opticians. I think they're orthodontists. But when they dug a trench under this building, they basically took out the spine of the building and it slipped to one side. It was originally in quite a good state, but it slipped quite sharply over the last 150 years. It was tied together, for us to see the sort of striation lines across there, to the Georgian building next door, and the windows at the top are made to look like ladder windows, which you saw earlier on in the Huguenot property. But the most interesting point that we see on this structure is on what's called the dragon post. They're the things that stick out to hold the floors together. Now, if we cross the road carefully over here without getting run over by a reversing vehicle, we can see a very nice inscription above the doorway there. The very old house bulging out over the road, leaning forward to try and see who's passing by on the narrow pavement below, from Charles Dickens. That's from David Copperfield in 1849. Now, we know Sir John Rolfe was the governor of a place called Jamestown in Virginia, the place the Pilgrim Fathers are heading off to. And he married a woman called Pocahontas. Have you heard of Pocahontas? Well, the story goes that she fell in love with John Smith. The true story of Pocahontas is written down elsewhere, but I'll go through it briefly. The TV, or rather the Disney version, is much more romantic, where we see a young girl catching butterflies and talking to birds. But in reality, she was the third daughter of the king of the Pocahontas tribe in Virginia in about 1600. And when John Smith arrived with the Virginia Company, he was the captain of the ship that took them over there. And John Rolfe's job was as governor of America, you could say. And we're coming up to an hour, so just a note there to myself. he basically needed to protect his colony. He noticed that the stuff they'd planted, these tobacco plants, weren't growing very well, and he sent John Rolfe up to get a high-value target so they could basically ransom something off it. And John Smith came across this little girl on the side of a river on the Potomac and captured her and took her as a kidnap victim to be ransomed back to the Pocahontas tribe. It meant basically that she was basically a valuable chip, and she was ransomed and taken back about 6 or 7 times over 5 or 6 years. Eventually she fell in love with her captors, and she protected John Smith when they tried to smash his head between 2 rocks. And the bookshop's here, Phil. When she protected John Smith against her own family, she was banished from the tribe, or so the story goes, and she returned to Canterbury, to this location here, and lived with John Rolfe for some years. She had a couple of children here. She was not very well treated by the king, but she was eventually given a place to live with John Rolfe in a place called Somerset House in London, where she resided for some time, but she was missing her father, and she requested to be returned to America, to which her husband agreed, and she sailed from a place called St Catherine's Dock out to the Thames, but she had caught typhus in London and perished at Gravesend. The memorial to Pocahontas is still at Gravesend, and we have an image of Pocahontas just sticking out here on the corner. If you look closely in this image, you can see she's got a headdress, a crown upon her of gold originally. In her hand she has the Atlantic Ocean or tobacco trees, and her feet are cloven, her legs are hairy, the sign of a foreigner. Up above on the next dragon post we see the image of John Rolfe, and he has the Governor of Jamestown's image on his chest. He has the image of tobacco leaves on his shoulder, and he is Sir John Rolfe. Now, these were 2 very important people in 1620 when this house was refurbished, and Pocahontas, of course, we just think of the Disney version, but the true story is worth looking into. Now, we've only done an hour, but I don't really want to take it too much further because my arm's hurting and people are looking at me strangely anyway. Just over there where the banksmen are loading up yet another huge truck is Mint Yard Gate, so called because when the King Charles came here in 1625 he minted coins down here. But more of the intelligentsia are coming, so I'm probably going to get mugged. And this is where I'll say goodbye to everybody. I'm going to have a piece to camera here as we look back on the old shop, so I'm going to switch my camera around here. And that's me, my godly image, and behind me the King's Corner cafes, where I'm going to have my little bit of coffee now. But thank you all for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed our little tour of Palace Street and the history therein. So next time you come down Palace Street, look above your heads, look beneath your feet, and discover there is more to the city than first we thought. Now, I have a book which I will shamelessly plug called The Hidden City Tour, which is on Amazon. I'll put a link later on in the description. And just like to thank you all for joining me, and I look forward to the next one. So to all of the Canterbury community group, thank you for joining me. God bless. Bye-bye.